Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to today's explainer class. Today, we're unpacking a figure whose historical footprint is just massive. I mean, so monumental that it literally permanently altered the course of human history. We are, of course, talking about Alexander the Great. From the ancient capital of Macedonia all the way to the very edges of India, we're looking at a chronological epic that honestly reads way more like a Hollywood blockbuster than a standard history lesson. But before we get into the nitty-gritty, I want you to just consider this number, 12. 12 years. That is the amount of time it took for one single man to conquer the known world. Crazy, right? By the time he hit 30, his empire stretched from Greece all the way to northwestern India. That incredibly compressed timeline immediately sets the high stakes for our masterclass today. Literally every single year, every month mattered. So here's today's lesson plan. We're going to follow a logical, chronological journey through this 12-year whirlwind. We'll start with the making of a king, move right into conquering the Persian Empire, push onward to the edge of the world, take a close look at his mysterious death, and finally unpack his Hellenistic legacy. All right, let's start with Chapter 1, the making of a king and the origins of a conqueror. To understand the man, we really have to first understand the boy. Born in 356 BC in Pella, the ancient capital of Macedonia, Alexander didn't just inherit royalty. He experienced a childhood practically engineered for absolute supremacy. In 343 BC, when he's just 13, his dad hires a personal tutor for him. And not just any tutor. We're talking about the philosopher Aristotle. For 3 years, completely away from the political drama of the court, Aristotle gives this young prince a rigorous education in science, medicine, philosophy, and rhetoric. He even fostered Alexander's deep, lifelong love for Homer's Iliad, which is a book Alexander would actually carry with him on literally every military campaign. And his brilliance wasn't just academic. When he was only 10 years old, a trader brings this massive, totally wild horse named Bucephalus to the king. The horse is completely unmanageable. King Philip orders it taken away, but young Alexander notices something that nobody else did. The horse was simply terrified of its own shadow. So by just turning the horse toward the sun, Alexander instantly tames it. This crazy display of intense observation prompted a super emotional Philip to tell his son, "Macedon is too small for you." Well, that ambition got tested way sooner than anyone expected. In 336 BC, King Philip is assassinated. The 20-year-old Alexander doesn't just inherit the throne, he brutally secures it, wiping out any potential rivals. With domestic threats crushed, he claims the title of hegemon, which is our first key vocabulary word today. Basically, as the supreme leader of the League of Corinth, he forcefully unites the Greek city-states to launch this massive pan-Hellenic invasion against their ancient enemy. Which brings us right to our second section, conquering the Persian Empire. This is the moment Alexander crosses the Hellespont and takes on the largest, most formidable superpower of the ancient world. The pace of this conquest was absolutely staggering. It kicks off in 334 BC, but by the very next year in Phrygia, he encounters the legendary Gordian knot. The prophecy said whoever untangled it would rule all of Asia. Whether he meticulously untangled it or, just sliced it in half with his sword, solving this puzzle acted as this huge psychological chain reaction. It fueled a relentless march through Egypt, where he's crowned pharaoh, and straight into the heart of the Persian Empire. And this brilliantly illustrates that Alexander wasn't just some brute force commander. He was a tactical genius who adapted to every single barrier. At Granicus, he used a rapid diagonal cavalry charge to completely shock the Persian line. At the Siege of Tyre, which was a heavily fortified island, he literally changed the geography by building a 200-foot-wide land bridge straight through the ocean. And then, at Gaugamela, he baits the Persian flanking cavalry to expose a gap, launching a decisive strike that utterly destroyed the army of King Darius III. Now, the backbone of all these victories was a specific tactical formation known as the phalanx. Picture a dense, block-like infantry formation where soldiers carried overlapping shields and massive, long pikes. It was this practically impenetrable wall of spears that pinned the enemy down, which perfectly set the stage for Alexander's fast-moving companion cavalry to sweep in and strike the fatal blow. It's exactly this combo that allowed him to remain utterly undefeated. But he was also a total master of psychological warfare and political spin. After his first major victory, he sends 300 sets of captured Persian armor back to Athens. They're dedicated to the goddess Athena, accompanied by this highly calculated inscription. Alexander, son of Philip, and the Greeks, except the Spartans, from the barbarians who inhabit Asia. See what he did there? He's deliberately framing his brutal campaign of conquest not as Macedonian expansion, but as righteous Greek revenge against Persia. With the Persian imperial center totally broken, we transition to Chapter 3, the edge of the world. Because Alexander wasn't satisfied with just ruling Persia. He wanted to push way beyond, into the grueling, punishing terrains of Central Asia and the Indian subcontinent. So the empire is secure, but the campaigning just continues relentlessly. From capturing the supposedly impregnable Sogdian Rock in 327 BC to his full-scale invasion of India, the army marches thousands of miles from home. You can almost feel the absolute exhaustion setting in as they push to the very limits of the known world maps of their time. Yet, amazingly, his tactical mastery never faded. At the Battle of the Hydaspes in India, he faced a terrifying new threat, King Porus' massive war elephants. To beat this, he orchestrates an absolute tactical masterpiece. He waits for the blinding rains of the monsoon season, executes a highly deceptive night crossing of a swollen river, and perfectly maneuvers his light infantry and cavalry to outflank those terrifying elephants. Just a brilliant adaptation to entirely new geographic and military barriers. But listen, even a tactical genius can't defeat basic human limits. Which brings us to a huge dramatic turning point, the mutiny. At the Hypaspes River, his undefeated army finally broke. Not from enemy swords, but from sheer exhaustion. They'd been marching and fighting for 8 continuous years. Faced with the terrifying prospect of fighting the massive Nanda Empire further east, his most loyal veterans just sat down in the mud and refused to march another step. Alexander, furious but completely powerless against his own men, is finally forced to turn back. That leads us to Chapter 4, a mysterious death. The army makes a brutal return journey to Babylon, the city Alexander intended to be the capital of his vast new empire. But the young conqueror would never leave it. Now, what's really interesting about this is that even 2,400 years later, modern historians and medical experts still violently debate what actually killed him. Let's impartially weigh the dueling theories. On one side, you have assassination theories, toxic wine or arsenic, pointing to ambitious conspirators in his ranks. On the flip side, natural disease theories argue for malaria, West Nile virus, or acute necrotizing pancreatitis. What we do know for sure is that years of extreme physical trauma in battle, heavy drinking, and a deeply weakened immune system left him incredibly vulnerable. Those final days in Nebuchadnezzar's palace paint a truly somber picture. Just 14 days before his death, he's engaging in heavy drinking. 11 days out, he's struck with severe weakness, acute abdominal pain, and a raging fever. Eventually, he loses his ability to speak entirely. In this heartbreaking final scene, his common soldiers, who are just incredibly anxious for their king, are allowed to silently file past his bed. The dying conqueror can only manage to silently wave goodbye to them. In June of 323 BC, Alexander the Great is pronounced dead. He was only 32. But as we all know, a death does not erase a conquest. Entering the final section of our explainer, Chapter 5, we have to answer the biggest question. Why does all this matter? How did this hyper-compressed 12-year military campaign permanently alter the trajectory of human history? Well, it starts with the absolute chaos he left behind. When asked on his deathbed who should inherit his massive empire, Alexander supposedly just muttered, "to the strongest." This total lack of a clear heir immediately plunged his vast territories into decades of brutal civil war. His rival generals, known as the Diadochi, or the successors, turned on each other to carve up the empire for themselves. Ultimately, the unified empire just shattered. By 275 BCE, it had been sliced into 3 major successor states. You had the Ptolemaic kingdom reigning over Egypt, the massive Seleucid empire stretching across the east, and the Antigonid kingdom controlling Macedonia. This intense political fragmentation really weakened the region, and it perfectly set the geopolitical stage for the rise and domination of the Roman Empire. So, his physical empire crumbled like a candle flame almost immediately, but his true, immortal legacy was cultural. It's encapsulated in the word Hellenistic, the widespread diffusion and blending of ancient Greek culture, language, and ideas across all those conquered lands. I mean, Alexander founded over 20 cities named Alexandria. He planted Greek cultural hubs from Egypt to India. This immense fusion even birthed entirely new syncretic traditions like Greco-Buddhism in the East.
and that cultural fusion connects directly to us today. Because of Alexander's campaigns, the Greek language became the lingua franca, the common bridge language of the entire region for centuries. It deeply influenced the Roman Empire, it was the predominant language of the Byzantine Empire until 1453, and it laid the philosophical and cultural groundwork that eventually evolved right into modern Western culture.
Which leaves us with a final provocative thought to chew on as we wrap up today's lesson. We've seen the sheer brilliance, and we've definitely seen the brutality. Was the immense, unimaginable cost of blood, destruction, and conquest across 2 continents worth the Hellenistic cultural enlightenment and human connection that followed in its wake? It's a heavy question, and one historians still wrestle with today. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible chronological journey through the life of Alexander the Great. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.